Hey, I'm Tinns.
I'm Nakis.
And this is Nintendo Heads, a retro podcast where we focus primarily on playing and rating old Nintendo games. Nakis, how's it going, man?
I'm good, bro. How about you?
I'm doing pretty good. I've had my coffee and I got my thinking cap on, my Zelda shirt. I'm ready to get into this thing. So let's start off with the question of the week, which is, what Nintendo title changed your life? Or rather, what is one Nintendo title that changed your life? So that could be, it doesn't have to be the best Nintendo game you've ever played or your favorite Nintendo game.
Right.
Just what is one that was pivotal in your gaming life, and how did it affect the trajectory of your gaming life?
Okay, so I've put a lot of thought into this, and I mean, there are many Nintendo games out there.
Yeah, it's hard to choose.
That I could, that have so much meaning to me particularly. Mm-hmm. But for this question, I chose Pokemon Red and Blue.
Okay, that's a great choice.
And I think you might know the story on this, but the reason I chose that is because when I first experienced those games, I had gotten one of the versions for Christmas from my grandparents, and then the following day, on Christmas Day, I had received the other version. And I'm sitting here like, I've got two of the same game. Am I going to enjoy this? My thoughts were completely negative at first.
I feel like at the time it was kind of bizarre. It's like, this is the same game, but it's not the same
especially
game.
Upon, playing.
I feel like you didn't have that at the time. Well, up to that point.
Even like, playing those games for the first time, I had that same thought. It's like, this is the exact same game. It wasn't until later that I figured out that there were version exclusives and different sprites and stuff like that in the games, which,
I almost forgot about that.
Yeah. I mean, that was a big turning point in my life because I went from something that I was not a fan of in the slightest to, about a week later after I had put a little bit of work in and started evolving my Charmander to that series becoming one of my all-time favorites.
As it should.
I mean, I still play Pokemon to this day. I still collect the cards.
Yeah, we love some Pokemon.
It quickly became one of the biggest video game empires, I would say, in the world. Not just America or Japan, but the entire world.
That is very true. I think Pokemon is the highest grossing franchise of all time.
Yeah, I mean...
So, obviously they did something right.
We didn't know that at that time.
Oh, yeah.
And a little bit of trivia, those Gold and Silver were supposed to be the very last Pokemon games that ever existed. They were supposed to be a sequel, and they were not. They had no plans of continuing it after.
And then it blew up.
It blew...
Well, it was already big, and then I think they couldn't stop. Obviously, look at them.
Right,
dude, that's a good choice. I agree. I have to agree. Pokemon is.
So, what was your?
I was gonna jump into it. So this is a tough question. It could have gone many ways. I thought about Super Mario World, which was one of the first games I remember playing. And it was just huge, and I played the crap out of it. I still go back from time to time and play that game. But I didn't want to choose that. So if I were to choose a game from my childhood, that would have been it. But in my adult life, I've really, really been, I guess, cracking down on playing some old just games that are considered among the greatest. And so I thought about Super Metroid. Dude, I played that a few months ago. I could easily say that right now. I mean, that game is so special. I won't get into it, but let's just say I played it back-to-back 5 times in a row. So, but I don't want to choose that as my answer either. I know I'm cheating here. I've got a few different answers, but what I want to say for my answer, it's actually a series. It's not just one particular game. There's no way I could pick a game, but the Mega Man series.
Okay.
Oh boy, I discovered that series last year, and it really it changed me. It changed the gamer in me. Like, it made me a better gamer, and those games are just so awesome. The whole theme behind the Robot Masters and how they each have their own stage, they each have their own music, which is really awesome. They've got some really good music in these games. So, and they're so perfect. I mean, there's a reason that for the first 6 games they barely changed the formula.
Yeah.
And they just they make you more responsive and just a quicker, better gamer. And I could talk on and on about Mega Man.
You know, I've watched you play several of those games, and I have yet to master any of them. I've started a couple.
I'm waiting for that day.
Yeah.
I think once it clicks with you...
It'll happen on this podcast for sure. But one thing I was going to say is I really like the direction that they went where you could pick which... where you wanted to go in that game. You didn't start... It wasn't a linear, like, you beat this boss, you beat this boss.
Right, it's not like level 1, level 2, level...
Yeah.
So, like, listeners, I don't know if you've played Mega Man. It's so, like, for the main... Like, at least the main games, like... Or for the general sense of the whole series, I mean, you have a stage select screen, and you've got these different robot masters. You might have Wood Man or Metal Man. You've got Elec Man, which is like an electric, and they're all different robots.
Don't their special abilities that you get from them help you beat the other ones or something like that?
Yes, that's another thing. So, okay. It's funny you picked Pokemon. I know we're probably extending this section out a little bit. That's okay. So, I have very loosely likened the Mega Man series to Pokemon in the sense that, okay, for one, you've got all these different robot master designs, which, in Pokemon, you've got so many different designs. It's kind of, that's like a main focus for them is how are we going to design these Pokemon? And that's the same with Mega Man, which, each one is different.
Right.
And they all just look so cool. There's something so charming about the design of these. They're the bosses, essentially, at the end of these levels. And they're just so cool. And so you get through their level, and then you fight the bosses, which they're pretty tough, not going to lie. And then you get their power or their weapon.
Right.
And then it helps you progress, throughout the game. And yes, going back to what you actually asked, there is a weakness and strength system there. So it is also kind of like Pokemon in that regard. So I want to get into our next section. So to do that, I want to ask you an unofficial question of the week, Nakis. What do you get when you take 3D Metroid, mix it with Tomb Raider, and add a pinch of God of War and Dark Souls in there and make it Voodoo themed? What do you get?
Only thing that comes to my mind is our game of the week, Shadow Man.
For Nintendo 64. Shadow Man, it was originally slated for 1998, and it came out late 99. Now, I said it came out for the Nintendo 64. It also came out on the Sega Dreamcast and the Sony PlayStation.
And PC.
And PC, that is true. And it was, in recent years, it has been ported. It was ported to the Switch and some other consoles.
I think it released in like the early 2000s as a remaster on Xbox and current gen PlayStation, whatever that
is
may
true.
be.
That's true. Okay. And then later it was ported to the Wii.
Yeah.
I mean, the Wii.
That specific version was ported to the Switch, I believe.
The remaster.
Yeah.
That's only on the Switch? We should have done our homework, guys. I'm so sorry. So, look, just know it's a Nintendo 64 game.
Yeah. The version that we played.
The version that Nakis played.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's an action-adventure game. Like I said, it is literally... it's a Voodoo 3D platforming Metroidvania. And when I say that, this game is... Nakis, you might disagree with me. This game is the most Metroid game I've probably ever played. I mean, it is very, very... I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm totally getting ahead of myself.
Run through a dungeon, find an item that improves getting to other places.
You are getting lost in this place, and it's awesome. So,
lost is an understatement.
Yeah, spoiler alert. I'm getting ahead of myself here. So, it's an action-adventure game developed by Acclaim Studios Deadside, published by Acclaim Entertainment. Now, the game is based off of a comic book series of the same name, Shadow Man. Originally published by Valiant Comics, which was bought by Acclaim Entertainment in 94. So, little fun fact about that, Valiant Comics, it must be pretty decent because it was founded in 89 by the former Marvel Comics editor-in-chief, Jim Shooter. I could be wrong, don't quote me on this. I think he may have taken a few employees with him. Like, he kind of got a few people to join his little team. Without saying too much about the game... And I'm not even a comic book person, but I wonder how good those comics are. I'd say they're pretty decent.
If they turned it into a video game, I would say that the comics are probably better than the game.
bear with me on the story of this game, guys. Nakis, you are gonna have to help me out here. It's crazy.
It's complicated and confusing, so we might not get it perfect. But
we're definitely not gonna get it perfect, but it's not a bad story by any means. It's actually really good, and I'm very. It piques my interest like no other. I mean, I've never played a game like this, but the way it's told is, maybe a little dated, a little primitive. So it starts off, the game literally starts off with Jack the Ripper of all people. So it's got real life, I'll just go ahead and jump into it. It's got real life serial killers depicted in this game. So it starts off with Jack the Ripper, and I think he's upset. I'm not saying he's gonna take his own life, but maybe he's contemplating it. I don't know. He's upset that his satanic, so to speak, or ritualistic murders don't fulfill his, I guess, goals. I think he's trying to, or at least in this story, he's trying to commit these ritualistic murders. I'm trying to keep this PG and PG-13 on this podcast, but this just happens to be a very dark game. So he's upset that he cannot reach immortality. I think that's his goal with whatever it was he's trying to do as a person. In the middle of his kind of mourning or feeling sorry for himself, it starts off with him, and then a man appears proclaiming to be Legion. He says, his name's Legion, and he explains to Jack the Ripper, it will work if done correctly if the right souls are killed. So, like, you have to kill, I guess, the right people, or that's something like that.
Right.
Basically, he can reach immortality. Just do as I say. So he says to Jack the Ripper, he says, you are an architect, or are you not? And he says I am. He explains that this will work, and he's got to take his own life and go to Deadside, which we'll get into that here in a second. You got Liveside and Deadside, which is essentially, you probably guessed it, it's like life and death, or life in the afterlife.
I pictured it. The way playing through it, I saw it as more of like the underworld versus the...
Yeah, kind of symbolic to that, yeah. Well, if you... I don't know if in your version, when you die in Liveside, it takes you to Deadside.
I hadn't died in...
You never... Oh, true.
Well, no,
you're like never in Liveside.
So we'll get to that later, but when you go to the bosses or whatever, and I die, it would just respawn me back in that.
In Liveside or Deadside?
In Liveside. And it would spawn me right back in that same fight.
I think a junkyard dog or something bit me when my health was low or something, and it took me to... The few times I did die in Liveside, which is wild that I even... Because it's... You're 90% of the game, you're in Deadside in this game.
Yeah.
So I don't want to derail us too much. So back to what... So Legion comes to Jack the Ripper, basically. He says, hey... We can make big things happen. Just do as I say. Basically, go to Deadside, build me an asylum, and we can kind of harvest the souls in there. Or essentially, they're building an asylum and a machine to create an army of undead to bring over to Liveside and take over, and I guess reign over both worlds, so to speak. So that's kind of what we're dealing with.
So right after that, Jack the Ripper does off himself.
So yeah, immediately after that, he says, "For we are many," and just bam. Which the voice acting, we'll touch up on that. It's bad.
Harry carries himself.
It's the voice acting is okay. I say it's bad, but it amuses me. It's so creepy and weird, and it's not even that.
It was perfect for that
game, kind of. Yeah, I mean, it's not even the voice acting. Sometimes the voice acting is decent, but the mix, and we'll get into the mix too. Not just the voice acting, but some of the music at times. I liked the music, but the mixing and the abrupt kind of stopping of it.
When you walk into a cave
or something, and it's like you get this little jingle, and you kind of get your head nodding for about 3 seconds, and then it'll like just stop, and then you're like, oh, okay. So back to our story. This is where Shadow Man comes in. So after the Jack the Ripper thing, he takes his life. He goes to Deadside. He builds an asylum. And it makes sense too. So it must have taken him like 100 years or something to build it, because he's in his respective time period, but then I think we're brought to like modern day with Shadow Man, or our main characters, Mike Leroy is his name, and he's a man from Louisiana. Now, his backstory, does it even explain it at all?
It just threw me right in.
He mentions something about his family being killed. Okay, so I had to, and even reading up on this, I had to really kind of, I'm still a little confused on what's going on, because I don't know anything about voodoo, but something about, so Mama Nettie there's a character named Mama Nettie. She's a voodoo priestess, and it's something like Mikey wants revenge, and so he turns to the voodoo priestess, and I think, or he turns to a different voodoo priest, and it cost him like the life of his little brother and maybe his mom and dad, his family. It's like just him. So
I think maybe the remaster maybe touches on that a little bit more, because
you would think.
Well, I'm saying I don't.
Spoiler alert, listeners! I played a Nintendo Switch version of the Game of the Week, and I'm not mad about it at all. So, like I said, we'll get into the differences there. But first, let me attempt to get through this. So you've got Agneta is actually her name, but she goes by Mama Nettie, and she has bonded the Mask of Shadows to Michael, which is some type of, imagine it's like an avatar artifact. It's like passed down. And it's given to, I guess it's like a voodoo artifact.
It gives him the alternate persona of Shadow Man.
Yes, it kind of gives him the power to walk the line of Liveside and Deadside. And he is not only that, but he is the protector of Liveside from any evil forces that might try to penetrate Liveside. Yeah. So we painted a pretty good picture there. Yeah. Essentially you got this, not even hero, almost an anti-hero. I mean, he is the hero, but he's kind of a badass like dude, and kind of devil may care, and more for a better word, type of guy. So the Master of Shadows gives him the power. You go around Deadside collecting Dark Souls, which I even kind of likened this game a little bit to Dark Souls, and I have never played those games. The only reason I said that is because I heard or read that the way it kind of navigate through and then open up like a shortcut. They say, I guess Dark Souls will kind of reward you in that sense for getting through an area, and then you'll open up a shortcut. That's why I likened it to that. So don't crucify me if you have played this game and you're like, what? That's not a Dark Souls game.
Before we get any further, let's talk about the teddy bear.
Okay.
So you have your little brother's teddy bear that at first you have no idea what it does, and then shortly after your opening sequence that we just talked about, it's in your inventory, you click on it, and then you see a bunch of empty slots, and then there's one that's filled out. Mm-hmm. The one that's filled out takes you to our first place in the Deadlands, which is the Wasteland, I believe, right?
I think so, yeah. So essentially the teddy bear is his
portal.
It's like a port key from Harry Potter or something. Yeah. It's his portal to the other side. And so he just uses that to traverse.
That becomes something that you discover is one of your only options at certain points to go anywhere else in the game, to advance in the game.
Yeah.
So you'll come to a spot thinking that there's other things to do, and then the only thing that's really logical to do is grab the teddy bear and travel to Liveside to talk to Nettie again and get more information on what to do next.
Yeah.
So that, I'll say that was like one of the more confusing parts of the game starting out.
Yes.
But knowing that I had to do that 2 or 3 times, that was like, okay, now there's nothing to do. I'm going to grab the teddy bear and go talk to him.
Yeah. Okay. The way I felt, obviously, your opinions might change throughout the week of playing the game, but so I got stuck, very stuck in this game, and I'm like, I don't know where else I'm supposed to go. So I'm watching playthroughs, I'm watching guides, and even in the guides, they would be kind of like what you just said. They would be going through an area. They'd be collecting these. So there's these little things called, listeners, Gado? Are they
Cado?
Cado. Cadeaux, which would be little French trivia for you. EAUX is plural, so it's not that's neither here nor there. But Cadeaux.
They look like hearts.
They look like little. Well, they look like little voodoo masks, like little demon kind of masks.
I saw it as like a heart with like ventricles coming out.
Okay, yeah.
Or like, kind
of heart shaped, kind of like face with horns. You got the.
I can see that too.
Yeah, so you collect 100 of these, and you can like upgrade your your health and all that. So they would be going through this area. They'd be collecting the Cadeau. They'd be doing killing some enemies, doing some stuff, and then like they would just. It didn't seem like they really did anything.
Except
they would just
collect the stuff.
Collect some stuff, kill some people,
absolutely.
and then they would just warp out. And I'm like, okay, well, and maybe they're literally just collecting some.
I think they've played this game before, obviously, and they know where.
Yeah.
I think the playthrough was showing you where, because I'm pretty sure we watched maybe the same one. If not, it was a very similar one.
I watched a few different ones.
Yeah, but
which we'll get into because I had to switch it up. No pun intended.
But so. I think they were showing you where to get the early on Cadeaus, so it made it easier to not have to go back to get those. Because, like in the playthroughs that I watched, there would be segments where you would grab the teddy bear just to go back to Wasteland after you unlock certain abilities that you could climb the waterfalls or whatever, just to get the Cadeaus, and then you would warp somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I think that the playthrough, without saying it, was just showing you where to get all these collectibles to better yourself in a sense, like
power your dude.
Yeah.
So we've got the story down. We've got a little bit into the gameplay. So we've said it plays like it's basically I call this Voodoo Metroid. The layout of this game is just so complex. It just keeps going. Like you're in an area and it just branches off into 3 or 4 different directions, and then you go down that way, and it just.
By the way, there is no map. There is no map.
No map. I'll complain about that here in a second. It's just okay. The game is laid out. It's so complex, but it's almost, and I got used to it. It wasn't so bad towards the end, but it's almost unorthodox at times. Like the way you go through areas is you're in these tight little corridors, very, very cramped spaces. Yeah, I don't know how else to really... You just have to either play the game or watch some gameplay to see... I don't know, some of the games I've played, it's almost like a smooth transition into the next room. Like, ooh, that's clever, that's cool, that makes sense, whatever. But sometimes the platformingness of this game is so... it's tricky at times, but I love it.
It's Nintendo 64-y.
It is. It is, for sure.
I'll say this, to touch on that. I'm not a huge fan of platformers. You know that. The audience now knows that. I enjoy playing Mario. I'm not great at it, and I'll be the first to say I've never beaten Super Mario World without save states.
Without save states?
Yeah.
Okay.
And
what about Super Mario 64?
And I could beat it without save states. I just wanted to beat it just to say that I beat it because I never had.
Right, dude.
Super Mario 64, I will beat the shit out of that game.
Really?
Yeah. Okay. That's like when 3D platforming came out. That's what I started.
Gotcha.
Enjoying
you would say you were more into 3D platforming than like 2D platforming.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
Now that being said, I didn't really have an issue with the 3D platforming in Shadow Man, and I did want to touch back on the not having a map thing. So I'm this type of gamer. I do not like linear at all. Like it's just one of my turnoffs when I play video games. And so you don't get linear with this game at all. But in a sense, I was telling Tinns the other day that yes, it is very confusing not having a map, but they make it in a way that like the caves intertwine with each other. Mm-hmm. So like when, as repetitive as it looks, you'll end up coming to a point where you're like, oh, I've been here before. I know. Yeah. I remember this area.
Yeah, traversing back through an area. You get to know the map pretty well that way, which is a cool thing.
So that being said, you get to know these areas, but then it'll throw you in a completely different place. Yeah. And then you're like, okay, got to learn this one.
Yeah. And then, yeah. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to cut you off.
No, you're good. At first, I was very skeptical. Like, am I going to even be able to play this game enough to get it? And then shortly after that, I was like, okay. Yeah. The more that you play it, the more that you understand, the more that you figure it out. Yeah. And it's just, We'll leave that there.
Yeah, no, I agree. I told you. So I got stuck, like really stuck like Chuck. Now, here's where I want to... let's get into the differences of the Switch versus the OG version. So the Switch version, it's got a lot of extra content, or if you will, cut content, or at least cut concepts for the original game. And man, when I say that, like, okay, so I played the game for about 2.5 or 3 hours last night. Really had trouble with this area. And this 2.5 hours of me playing, this area that I was traversing, including the items in it, or no, the items are in the OG game, but they're in a different place. But there's an extra boss and everything. And so it was completely cut from the original game. But so, when you get on the tram, remember how... I was having a hard time. I'm like, I went to the tram, and then that's where you kind of find the portals.
The cathedral or whatever.
Yeah, the cathedrals or whatever. But I'm like, but then I'm lost after that. I can't progress any further with that. So, come to find out, there's a whole extra area that you can go to on the tram. There's another lever, and it takes you, there's a 3 and a 2. You hit the 2, and it takes you to this entire cut content area. And I spent probably 3 hours trying to traverse this area last night. So, you were a good deal farther than me, but I've got
extra
some
stuff that you had to
good
do.
amount. And okay, so when you found the secret room with like the so to speak, the cheat activate, I don't know what.
So that I figured out later on
or whatever.
Yeah, so that is just, there are certain cheats in the game that you just walk up on, and then you have the ability to activate it in your menu. That I called it a cheat room because that's...
Well, it says cheat activated in the game. We're saying cheats, but it's not. It's game...
It just alters the appearance of your
The
character.
game gives it to you. So,
or at least the ones that I've...
The area that you went to find, like, the secrets or whatever, not for me. That's not on my game. There's a boss there.
So the Cato upgrades weren't down there?
It was, but you drop down, and there's a big boss named Yort. He's creepy, and he kind of reminds me of the boss with the hands in Ocarina of Time in the...
Bongo?
No. Close, but in the Shadow Temple, the mini-boss. The white thing that, like, the creepy dude that's, like, made of nightmare fuel. And you got the hands, like, sticking up and they'll grab you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's also in Take It the Lens of Truth. And
yeah,
it's also how you get the hover boots. So, spoiler alert for that game, if you haven't played it yet. So, where was I? Yeah, it looked like that thing, but huge and with a huge tail. There would be times, so I ended up taking him down, but it took probably 6 or 7 tries. I would go down there. One time I dropped down, he smacks me with his tail and off of it's like a setup where you can get knocked off into the lava, kind of like another Ocarina of Time reference, Volvagia, or Volvagia, however you pronounce the dragon's name. Dude, yeah, he kept knocking me off with that tail, and it was really upsetting me. So I finally took him down, though.
Let me ask you
and then you drop down, and you've got the secret area.
Okay.
So
let me ask you this. So I would do want to ask you, talking about the Switch version versus the version I played, were there quality of life improvements? Were there,
Oh, yeah.
I'm sure I've seen you playing that game, and it looks a lot brighter.
Yes.
Than it did on my version.
Let's talk. Yeah. So that OG version. That's a gripe, man. That's a dark game. Like, you can't see.
I will give you the hardest example I can, or the best example I can. There are certain parts where you have to jump in, quote unquote, water and swim around, but the water is like a maroonish dark red color, and it's literally, you can barely see yourself on the screen. That's how dark it is.
Yeah.
Later on, I figured out that if you go into the settings, you can increase the
Shadow Man.
Yeah, well, you can increase the brightness setting.
Yeah.
Which helps you,
bit.
But barely. Yeah.
So, okay, you asked quality. Yes, man, that's exact. So they've added a bunch of stuff, and I've seen other people that, like, I've seen comments, from people that grew up with this game that, like, they love it. Like, they love the new content. They said it's like kind of like almost like playing the game new for the first time.
Yeah.
There's new stuff to explore. So there's that. I think it's awesome because if I had to really, honestly, I think it needed that because. So you have the 5, which we didn't even talk about them. The goal of this game is to get rid of the 5. There's like 5 serial killers, again, depicted on real life people, and then you take out Legion. There's no other bosses in the game. There's no mini bosses or anything. But in my version, in the Switch version, there is. I've already fought 2 mini bosses that they're not humanoid at all. They're like creepy zombie like, like I kind of described.
Right.
Yort was the boss's name. So graphical enhancements to a pretty good degree. Yes, it is brighter. You can actually see what the heck you're doing, and you can see your HUD, which when I tried to watch you play, I could not figure out what was going on with the HUD for the longest time. You've got this little purple meter, and it serves as, so there's these doorways that you can enter, and you have to, and they have a like a meter.
They're called
around the
soul gates, I believe.
So there's these soul gates. They're gates into like the next area, but you have to have your meter upgraded to the same amount that it kind of displays on the gate itself. So it'll be...
It's 1 out of 10. You start with...
Kind of goes in a round,
You start with 1 or 0, I believe, and then the more of these dark souls that you collect, it upgrades that meter.
But it also serves as how much you can charge your gun, too.
So
it kind of serves as multi-purpose.
I took that as like the dark souls are what charges the gun.
True. Which it's called the shadow gun.
It's called the shadow gun. And that is the only real, like, ballistic weapon that you get in the Dark World or in the Deadside. Now, to play on that, there's only, like we said earlier, there are only certain times where you go back to live side, and there are other weapons that you get along the ways. I will go ahead and say I didn't make it far enough in the game to get those weapon upgrades or whatever.
Can I play off of that?
Yes.
That's a gripe of mine. One thing the game doesn't do super well is the pacing of like your upgrades. It just takes like pretty much you're using that shadow gun like the whole game. Which it's kind of a weak weapon. That is kind of a weak.
Well,
point.
when you're able to charge it more, it becomes a lot more.
It becomes okay. Well, okay. I mean, you do get the Asan and like other. You've got something
the
else.
baton.
The baton, yeah. Those are the 2 that I've got right now that kind of do really, like, some good damage.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do have some,
I see the shadow gun kind of like Mega Man's weapon. Like, if you're just shooting it regularly, it's only going to do, like, pieces of damage. But if you charge it and then let it go, it does, like, exponentially greater damage.
For sure.
And like I said, the more Dark Souls, the higher your meter, the more charge that you do have on that weapon. So the big enemies with the machine guns in the asylum and stuff,
right?
Instead of shooting those guys like 10 or 15 times, with 2 of the charges, I could take one of them down.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
I got you.
I do want to kind of get back into the story just to kind of give you guys an idea of what goes on. Okay. I just wanted to say, like, you go to the wasteland, you get so far, you talk to the snake guy, and then...
We didn't even mention Jaunty.
Yeah.
Jaunty's his name. There's a snake, and he's
like your guide through the...
He's like the brightest part of the game. This game is very dark and gruesome and grotesque, which we didn't even stress just how weird, creepy, and just grotesque this game is. There's like rooms made of skin, and I'll leave that to your imagination.
Yeah.
It's creepy. I mean, it's very voodoo-like. I mean, literally entire, like, there's like chapels made of what looks like rotting human skin. And I totally cut you off there, but yeah, I wanted to pinpoint that. I feel like I was going to say something else. It is grotesque.
So I got a couple points that I want to make.
You said Jaunty. Jaunty is one of the he's like the most lighthearted thing about the game, I would say. Like he's this very strong Irish accented.
But depicted as a voodoo entity, like in the form of a snake.
Yeah, he's a snake. He's a giant snake that kind of helps
with
you.
Like a top hat.
I say he helps you, but here's another small complaint. The game kind of encourages you to go and like go back and talk to Mom and Eddie or talk to Jaunty, and they never help you. They're like, You're a shadow man. You figure it out. And it's like,
that's exactly what they do.
Thanks, bro.
So to touch back on that, your first area is the wasteland. You go, you meet Jaunty. You keep going, and then you'll run into certain gates or areas that you can't go through yet, or you'll see items from a distance that you can't access yet. And so playing games like this over the years, I've learned that, okay, I'm going to have to come back here
for sure
in order to unlock something. If a new player was just thrown in, that would be my advice. Is just honestly, my best advice is watch a guide, a walkthrough of it, or have a paper guide if there's even.
I don't know if I told you this. So obviously I played the Switch version. So I had a hard time finding a guide for specifically the Switch version at first. So I told you I got stuck. I mean, I got really, really stuck, and I was watching a guide of the OG version, and it wasn't helping me because my game had things that it didn't have. So to add insult to injury, I did find the remastered version. It was in videos, not one long video, and it was helpful to a degree because he was actually explaining. He was talking over the video, saying what he was doing, why he was doing it, and really just giving us knowledge about the game. But here's the thing: the game has been updated since then, and there are still even more slight differences in the version that I was playing and the same version that he was playing. So they've just kind of tweaked certain rooms to just be a little bit different. So I'm like, well, he jumped down this hole, but that hole's not here, and this one it's over here or something. So I had a really hard time kind of doing that, but with enough with persevering through, man. I mean, I spent probably had to have been at least 2 hours in this area. I'd say 2.5 to 3 hours playing this area that I probably could have got through in an hour if I knew what I was doing. But I persevered. I mean, I almost gave up. I'm like, dude, this is crazy hard. But man, I'll say this, listeners. At the beginning of the week, I was like, this is a great game. It's fun, and I was kind of sad because I'm like, this is one of those games where I want to progress, and I want to, kind of dive in and love this game more and experience it. But I'm like, I just don't know if I'm going to be able to find out where I'm going. I mean, I was bummed a little bit. I went a couple days without playing it, and I picked it back up and really looked around. I started trying to, find another guide, and it helped me persevere. And I'm a pretty good chunk of the way through the game, I think.
So you finally find the gate room with all the different gates and stuff in it, and then
like the cathedral type.
Well,
or
the
shadow gates or whatever
that leads you to the asylum at first.
Gotcha. Oh, yeah.
And so then your next part is the asylum, which is equally, if not more, confusing than the first area. And then the game just plays like that. You go, you find, so many cados to upgrade your health and stuff, which I only got one upgrade. Tinns and I also had a point where we had played roughly the same amount of the game, and I was trying to show him where to go, but he had actually missed one of the Dark Souls, and that is another thing.
But I think it's because I had to go to a whole different. The game is a little bit different,
right?
Because they've added new areas and stuff. It kind of guide you in a different direction. Like, I wasn't ready. I couldn't go to that area yet. Not because I missed one, but it was just in a different area. Like I said, that tram would take you to a whole new area. Let's kind of move into the next section, and we'll kind of wrap up what we liked and what we didn't like about it. I've got it written down here. So just little things that stuck out to me. So I want to kind of really stress this. So I mentioned the game. It's heavy. It's just absolutely gruesome and gross. And there's there's body part. It's okay. In the remastered, they had cut some of this content because it was just too dark, I think. So some of the stuff you see, and you get to go to the experimentation rooms where they're doing experiments on these souls, and you can clearly tell what's going on, science experiments and just torture chambers, and it's dark, man. Now, all of that to say, and maybe I'm sure I would have felt differently if I played this as a young child. It was never truly because you have games that are scary.
Yeah.
Legitimately horrifying kind of to play. This game never truly, and I don't know if they were going for that or just gruesome in nature, but
it was scary and creepy, but not so like scary that like
it was
your heart's
gory and
racing.
gruesome,
It was
but
gory
it
and gruesome
wasn't scary.
and weird and just so left field. It was lighthearted enough, and going back to Jaunty kind of makes it a little lighthearted, and some of the, you know, maybe it's the cheesy dialogue. You know, Shadow Man kind of says some snarky, witty things that kind of make you laugh. Like say you die in an area and it respawns you. Mikey's dialogue cracks me up. He'll just be like, "Whoops," or "Unbelievable," and I'm sitting there like, literally what I'm thinking right now, unbelievable. Like there's no way I just died right there.
So just a quick little touch on what you just said. One of my favorite parts of this game, and you actually are the one that brought it up, but when you die in an area, yes, it sets you back to a certain checkpoint, but when you go through the game again up to the point that you died, all the enemies are gone. So like every enemy that you kill is gone.
Yeah, no respawns. But you know what else is gone? They dropped the ball, and even in the remaster, and I'm glad you brought this up. Okay, the enemies, say you make it through an area, you kill all the enemies, but then you die. So when you respawn, you go back through. Those enemies are gone, but so are all of the pots that give you all of your health and magic meter. So that was giving me a hard time with Yort, actually. That was one of the reasons, is because I was going back through, and there's nothing for me to pick up along the way. So if I did get hit by like a spike or something...
I learned that the hard way during the early boss fights, when I found the serial killers or whatever. Yep. You can, in the live side, you have to fight all the 5 serial killers, and if you are playing the Nintendo 64 version, you can get there without realizing that you're not supposed to be there until the end game. Yeah, which happened to me.
I think that happened to me now. Like I kind of went to one of the bosses, and I don't think I'm ready for it.
So I start trying to kill this guy, and I got him down like 2 or 3 times after 3 or 4 times of trying to fight him.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking that I'm doing work on him, and it's not touching him.
Yeah.
So that being said, back to what you were saying about the health drops, I had already gotten all of my extra health, and when you respawn, there's nothing left.
Yeah.
So yeah,
that and I think they could have. Maybe, I don't know, they could have maybe fixed that. I don't know if they did that on purpose to make it harder, but look, man, if I died with full health, obviously if I go back through and I've got less than full health, I'm gonna have a time here. So, you know, it could have been a little more generous. Now, I will say, if you kill an enemy, it's 100% guaranteed to drop health for you. So I thought that was kind of nice.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, unless I'm wrong,
no,
I'm pretty sure every single enemy you kill. Yeah. So that was kind of the incentive to kill everybody, and so they're not there if you die, and you come back through. So other things I really liked about it, I liked the music. Mm-hmm. I kind of touched earlier on.
It was very fitting for the game.
It was very fitting. There was that first couple days. It seemed like you kind of had that main theme in that first kind of chunk of the air. First chunk of the game. It was in my head, like it was getting stuck in my head, and it's so, like you said, it just kind of fits the theme. It's like kind of dark, almost. It's got that Vania, that Metroidvania kind of feel. Like we're in this now, Like I like the music. The mixing was kind of bad at times, but I liked the ideas they did with the music, and I want to compare it to another. One of my all-time favorite games. Jack 2 does a really cool thing with music. So you'll have the theme going, and depending on certain actions that are done, for instance, if you take your gun out, it adds an element to the music. So it's like it was kind of soft and missing like a background layer. Now you put out your gun, now you got like a little beat going to it or something.
Okay.
And then if you in the same breath, if you get on your hoverboard, it does the same thing, but like a different element is added. So it's like you get these different versions of the song, and it's really cool. And I probably took that for granted growing up, but this game kind of does that sometimes. But again, it's like as soon as you kind of get the music going, a lot of the time it seems like you go into a new area and it just cuts off. Like little hallways that take 4 seconds to get through will have its own little music. I think that's weird. It's like I wish it just flowed.
Or no music at all.
Or no music or whatever. It was a little strange in that aspect, but I did like it in and of itself. I liked that it was totally different from anything even though I have compared it to games. But the combination of all those games that I can kind of compare it to, it makes it unlike anything I have personally ever played.
I feel that I have that same notion, like it's something that I've never ever experienced, but at the same time it has so many elements of all these different games that we've touched on. Tomb Raider, and the platforming is very Tomb Raider-ish.
Yes.
And
the model even kind of is stiff and skinny, kind of like Tomb Raider.
Yeah.
Lara Croft.
Yeah. And so like the Metroidvania aspect, I totally agree with that. I also wanted to say, it feels very Resident Evil-ish. It just has so many elements.
Horror games, if you will.
Yeah, not even horror, but adventure, action games. There's a lot of Zelda in there as well.
Yes.
As far as raiding
just pushing
dungeons
and platforming.
Yes.
And, getting your items and progressing. Yeah.
So,
which, very, very loosely, I have seen Zelda compared to like a Metroidvania, but I don't classify it as that because of the setting. But that's a whole other ball game.
I'll go ahead. And I mean, I don't know
but you are getting your items and upgrading.
Yes. So, and then you unlock new areas because of those items, or unlock new places that you can go or whatever. So I don't know if you wanted to say final thoughts for, the final, but I don't know if this would be classified as a final thought.
We're getting there. I haven't said the things I would have done. Like,
well,
I want to talk about what I like, and then things I would have fixed, and then we'll give it our final
I just want to say
ratings.
this, like my initial thoughts of this game were, oh, cool, a 64 game that I've never heard of.
Yeah.
I totally dismissed it, and then immediately as I was playing it, it just grew on me.
Yeah.
Like, it's like a fungus, dude. Like,
okay, just to kind of add to that, I mean, I feel like we may have scoffed at it a little bit. We kind of joked about like, oh, this.
Well,
this is all right.
So to preface this, when we started the randomizer or the wheels that we're picking our games from, what you guys may not know, because I don't think we've even talked about it, but we
have not talked about our.
We do have a list of good games and a list of very bad rated games that we compiled all together.
Yes.
So I don't know if this is on the good list or the bad list.
I don't know.
But
it's funny because now I want to go back and look.
I would assume that this would have been on the good list.
I hope. So, just to go back to what you're saying, I kind of scoffed at the game a little bit. Listeners, this is a good game. I quickly realized this is just a really dark Metroidvania. And again, I know I sound like a broken record, but it is. I'm like, it was an unfolding realization of I'm playing a really great, possibly looked over title.
It reminds me a lot of one of my all-time favorites that I forget about even existing, Half-Life 2. The game just progresses, and then it'll throw you into a completely different random landscape that has nothing to do with the one that you were just in, but it makes so much sense, and it does it in a good way. You go from the wasteland to the asylum to the cathedral, and it's just like, it doesn't make any sense, but it works the way that it's intended to. Like,
I've heard good things about the Half-Life series. I just read a little review on that game the other day, actually. So.
It's
and how they weren't, the person that wrote the review was not a fan of the first game, but they talked about the second game and talked about everything it did better. And
that game
I've heard nothing but good things about that whole series.
I actually just took it in the store.
So going back to just a couple more things that I liked about the game, and then things I didn't like, and then we'll give it a rating and we'll close it out. How about that? So. I've got in my notes here. It's bittersweet how lost you can get in the game, which we touched on that. I mean, there's nothing more to be said about that. Something we haven't really said at all. There's a 2-handed weapon system.
Yes.
We haven't even said that. You can technically shoot your gun, I guess, with your left hand. I never have done it.
That's the only way that I've watched those videos is the guns in the left hand and the other weapons in the right.
Okay, that kind of makes sense because it's your strong. You got your weak. Kind of somewhat weak gun, and then you got your strong. Yeah, you can. It's a 2-handed weapon system, and I think that's cool.
I don't know. I haven't played a whole lot of games like that. I mean, a couple years ago, I finally broke down and played Skyrim, and I loved that, how you could assign it to a hand. Like,
yes.
I think that's cool.
Yeah, everything else in my notes for the pros, we've pretty much talked about. So let me talk about things that I would maybe change. The controls are intuitive, but the story, direction, and even the HUD are just not the most intuitive.
I didn't have a problem with the HUD per se.
Well, once I figured out the HUD, and honestly, it's so dark and blurry on the OG version, I couldn't even see what I was looking at. It was a lot easier to tell what was going on with the meter, the HUD, in the remake. But yeah, the story, while it is a great story, it just could be told a little better.
Yeah.
The backstory of your main character could be, they could freshen up on that a little bit, I guess.
I'm assuming that when this game came out, it was directed towards readers of the comic.
Maybe that's what we're
You know
missing.
what I'm saying?
Maybe
maybe there is a backstory that we don't know.
That is the missing. I didn't even think about that. I even told you and our listeners it is based off a comic.
Yeah.
I didn't even consider that.
And I don't know if that's true.
Because it's like, do you need much backstory on Spider-Man if you're reading a Spider-Man comic?
Right.
I mean, if you're playing a Spider-Man game for that matter.
Yeah.
You get the gist of what,
Yeah.
But just for all intents and purposes of the game, I just wish the story could have been a little more,
Yes.
no pun intended, fleshed out.
It's very, like you were saying earlier about the language in the game, it's very, it's very old Englishy, or very like,
it's so, poetic. It's like
yes,
the most
that's what I was looking for.
You get to a new area and your main character is just like, English was not like my major. I was a Spanish major. But yeah, I mean, it's the most Edgar Allan Poe stuff you could possibly hear.
Yeah.
I mean, just so dark and demented and
that's
depressing.
what I struggled with, is like, even listening to Jaunty, it's like he's saying all this stuff, and
Jaunty has a strong accent,
and my attention span is not keeping
I have
up.
to read it a couple times.
Yeah.
I'm that way as well.
I want to touch on some of my points that could be improved on. So we talked about there are multiple points where you get lost. There's nothing left to progress in these certain areas, and then you have no other option but to use the teddy bear, port key, whatever you want to call it, to go back and talk to Nettie, and then go back and talk to Jaunty immediately after that, in which they just have a unnecessarily long cutscene of dialogue that leads to nothing except them saying, well, you'll figure it out.
I want to go ahead and wrap this episode up, Nakis. So what we'll do is we'll give our final thoughts, and we'll give a rating, and we'll give actually two ratings. We'll do a rating for 1999, the respective time period of when the game came out, and then we'll also do a rating for today, which is May of 2024. So if I were to go back, not even if I were to go back, in 1999, I think this was a good game. I could really see this as a game that my older brother would have liked or even loved. Mm-hmm. I just feel like we somehow missed out on it. I got some of my video game tastes, if you will, from my older brother, and I could totally see him loving this game, and then in turn, me and my younger brothers would just have to follow suit because this game is just really cool. For back then, with we had less games and less. There was just less going on in the world. We had more time to play games and kind of sit down with them. So I think it would have been. I'll say this. I'll get to my score. So I would give it an easy 8, maybe even an 8.5. That's a very generous 8.5. I'll say a solid 8. Now, I just want to let the listeners know, this is kind of like Whose Line Is It Anyway? It's like where the points don't matter. These ratings do not matter. You don't have to listen to us. This is just two guys who like gaming and our opinions and final thoughts on this game. And so, that being said, let me give my current rating. I think if you were to play the remaster, which is not technically what we're rating, but the remaster is a solid, pretty much an 8. I would maybe give the OG version a 7.5,
just because it is a little bit dated. It's very, very dark and hard to see, and there's no mini bosses, and there's no map. And I understand we've stated that's kind of just part of it, but where internet wasn't as you couldn't just go to the internet for guides.
Right.
Now, if you had a guide, that might bring this up to a solid 8. So I guess I'm kind of 8 across the board. But just to be fair, I'll give it 8 for back then, 7.5 for today. But if you get the remaster, I say it's easily an 8, maybe an 8.5.
Okay.
I know that's all over the place, guys, but Nakis, what do you give it?
My first thoughts of this game were, where is this going? And then I ended up actually really loving the game, and I do intend on finishing my playthrough on it.
Oh, yeah.
So, a rating for back in the day, I would have to give this... You're not going to agree with me at all, but I would give it like a solid 6. Only on the grounds that it is all over the place. You do have to figure out the puzzle that is this game, and kind of piece that together yourself. And without a guide back in the day, like you were talking on, I don't see myself getting very far. I didn't have the older siblings or anything to kind of play
show you the
with.
ropes.
And this game was rated M. So,
right. It was for mature audiences.
Not
obviously.
saying that I wouldn't have had access to this game because, my parents bought me Grand Theft Auto and stuff.
Sure.
But honestly, I don't know if it would be one that I would see in a video game store and be like, I would like to play that game. That's where my answer is coming from. I give it a solid 6 for today. For the replayability, the fact that you can go and look up a guide or a walkthrough on this game, my answer for today is a solid 8.5.
Okay.
I do. For a very specific niche market of gamer, I believe that this game is excellent. So yeah, I would give it a solid 8.5.
8.5
today.
Okay.
That being said, I have full intentions on completing the playthrough that I've started. It's got me hooked, and in my spare time, that's what I'll be doing.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. So guys, there you have it. We give it about an 8.5 for today's time. Seriously, this game is awesome. It's a hidden gem. I think it was looked over by many back in the day, myself and Nakis included, or just it slipped under our radar or whatever, or we weren't allowed to play it. But guys, go check out Shadow Man. Check out a speed run, a playthrough, or play the game. Again, you can find this on the Nintendo Switch online store for $20, or you can pick up a physical cart for $25. So this game is accessible. So do yourself a favor, get to know this game, play it, watch a speed run.
Get out there and play it, guys.
Yeah, just get to know this game. That being said, guys, they are making a new Shadow Man game. Super stoked. Graphics look awesome. I can't even remember. It was a very short teaser I saw. Super stoked. You can believe that I will be checking that out. So,
heck yeah, me too.
Yeah, I think we both would enjoy that. So, okay, Nakis, it's been fun, man. I think that about wraps it up. What do you think?
Yeah. Everything that I wanted to talk about was talked about, and I think we covered the bases that we wanted to.
So,
thank you guys for listening along.
Yeah, thank you guys so much. And I want to thank Capcom, Kenji Yamazaki, and RushJet1 for our intro and outro music. Thanks again, guys. I'm Tinns.
I'm Nakis.
And we're out. By the way, guys, next week's episode, Ham Taro, Ham Hams Unite. See you next time.